Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, Polish Prime Minister accuses EU of blackmail as dispute over rule of law escalates, plus future at stake for Kabul Orphanage as funding runs dry. EU and Polish officials have clashed over a recent court ruling, making public a bitter disagreement over the rule of law and the fundamental principles of the bloc. During a heated debate at the European Parliament, the EU Commission chief vowed to act to prevent Poland undermining EU values, while the Polish Prime Minister accused the bloc of blackmail.
The European Commission's chief executive warned Poland on Tuesday that its challenge to the supremacy of Europe Union law called into question the very foundations of the 27-nation bloc and could not go unpunished.
Honourable members, the European Commission is, at the moment, carefully assessing this judgment. But I can already tell you today, I am deeply concerned. This ruling calls into question the foundations of the European Union. It is a direct challenge to the unity of the European legal order, strong community of values and democracy. Honourable members, we cannot and we will not allow our common values to be put at risk. The Commission will act, and the options are all known. First option, infringements, where we legally challenge the judgment of the Polish Constitutional Court. Another option is the conditionality mechanism and other financial tools. The Polish government has to explain to us how it intends to protect European money given this ruling of their constitutional court.
In response, the Polish Prime Minister rejected what he described as the language of threats and accused the EU of overstepping its powers. He also said the Polish Constitutional Court's ruling had been misunderstood.
I do realize that the recent ruling of the Polish Constitutional Court has become the object of a fundamental misunderstanding. Much has been said about the primacy of law. Rule of law is as important for Warsaw as it is for other capitals. And that's not just a matter of the treaties. That's also a principle enshrined in our Constitution. We do not have differences of opinion. The difference lies in whether the rule of law is being used as a pretext to demand things of member states which are not in the treaties.
The tribunal ruling has raised concerns that Poland, like the UK, could exit the EU, but the Polish Prime Minister has repeatedly insisted the country has no plans to leave the Union. During the heated debate at the European Parliament, lawmakers accused Poland of undermining the foundations of the EU and taking the country down an authoritarian path.
The sinister game that you are playing is very clear. The sinister game is that you are putting a politicized constitutional court inside Poland. And that politicized constitutional court is criticized by whom? By the European Court of Justice. So the way to eliminate the decisions of the European Court of Justice is to take with the politicized Constitutional Court of Poland a decision that the ECJ has no longer a right of decision in Poland. That is what you have done.
Mr. Morawiecki, despite of what you have been saying today, I must admit that I have to ask myself the question, after what happened in Poland in the last weeks and months, whether on the 7th of October, when this ruling was proclaimed by the Constitutional Tribunal, you actually did not secretly open a bottle of champagne together with Vladimir Putin. Because seriously, when I look at the situation, political vision and political agenda, I see a lot of similarities between Putin and what your government is doing. What you are trying to do is to convert Poland into an authoritarian state with weak democratic institutions and a weak enforcement of fundamental rights of its citizens. And you seem to be sharing another political aim with Vladimir Putin, and that is a weak and disunited European Union.
Finland's Prime Minister for European Affairs says compromise could not be the solution and the European Commission must act.
We do not want to escort anybody to the outdoor. We respect the wish of the Polish people to be inside the EU and continue as member of the EU, but we will not compromise the value base of the EU. So the primacy of the EU law applies, and Poland has already accepted that once she became member of the European Union. This seems to be an impasse, but I'm sure that we will find a solution, but the solution is not compromising the EU legal base.
Unlike the UK before its Brexit referendum in 2016, support for membership of the EU remains high in Poland. Earlier this month, more than 100,000 people gathered in the capital Warsaw to show their support for Poland's EU membership.
To the situation in Afghanistan, with the country facing a currency crisis after the chaotic pullout of Western forces, an orphanage providing food, shelter and education is running out of funding, and its director is desperately trying to regain donations. The ruling Taliban has urged Western governments to resume aid donations, but some are demanding the group guarantees basic civil freedoms, one of which is allowing girls to attend secondary school.
While many girls across Afghanistan remain at home and their brothers go to school, 9-year-old orphan Samira attends classes in her orphanage every day with hopes of becoming a doctor.
My father is dead, and I want to become a doctor in the future. I want to serve my homeland and save others from diseases.
Samira hails from the northeastern Badakhshan province and has been at the Shamsa Children's Village orphanage for 2 years. But as the orphanage runs out of funding and now food, there's a chance that Samira's dreams could be crushed. Ahmad Khalil Mayan, program director at Shamsa Children's Village, says he's cutting back on the amount of fruit and meat he gives the children each week because the home is running out of money. For the last 2 months since the Taliban seized control of the country and millions of dollars in aid suddenly dried up, he's been desperately calling and emailing donors, both foreign and local, who supported him before.
We don't have enough funding. Donation is unfortunately at zero level. Bank operations are very limited. They are providing just $200 per week. So such a big project cannot be done by $200. As you see, the whole project, it's not possible for us. And we are facing problems providing foods and other necessity items for these children.
The lack of funding, which has hit charities, non-governmental organizations and ordinary Afghans since the hardline Islamist Taliban movement took back control of the country, is forcing Mayan to make tough choices.
From 127 kids, we sent some of them to their families and immediate relatives because we were not in position to feed them. But right now, one by one, they are coming back and we are facing problems.
Such facilities play an outsized role in Afghanistan, where tens of thousands of people have been killed in wars that have ravaged the country for more than 40 years. For the orphanage to shut down will be devastating for the children, who receive mathematics, English and computer lessons as well as physical education, not to mention food and shelter.
So the time to act is now. The time to ensure that supplies reach facilities is now. The time to ensure that food, nutrition is now. And we are asking for support from the international communities to help us do more in the next 2 months before the winter really hits the country.
Facing an economic crisis as winter approaches, Taliban officials have urged Western governments to resume aid donations and call on the United States to lift a block of more than $9 billion of Afghan central bank reserves held overseas. Some are demanding that the group guarantees basic civil freedoms, including allowing girls to attend secondary school. The Taliban, which banned all girl education when they ruled from 1996 to 2001, have said they are working on the issue.
Let's step into Afghanistan's pavilion at the Expo 2020 Dubai to see how a private collector from Vienna is helping lift spirits as the country copes with the chaos that has marked the Taliban's return to power.
An Afghan who fled his country over 40 years ago has stepped in to rescue Afghanistan's exhibition at the Dubai World Fair after the Taliban takeover in his homeland in August scuttled official Afghan participation in the mega-cultural extravaganza. The 62-year-old Vienna-based antique dealer gathered up his family collection of Afghan artifacts, including carpets, daggers and jewelry, to fill the Afghan pavilion that had remained shut when Expo 2020 opened on October the 1st.
As an Afghan, this was a duty for me to participate in the 2020 Expo in Dubai. I am just very happy that Afghanistan's pavilion is open.
The tricolour flag of Afghanistan flutters at the Dubai fairgrounds, while the white flag used by its new Taliban rulers is absent, symbolic of the challenges facing the hardline Islamist movement in gaining international recognition. Rahimi has lived in Austria since fleeing Afghanistan in 1978, when the then president was killed in a communist coup that spiraled into decades of nationwide violence and bloodshed. He and relatives joining him in Dubai paid the cost of transporting the artifacts that now comprise the Afghan exhibition amongst 191 other countries at the 6-month World Fair. For Rahimi, the exhibition represents all Afghans and hopes the intricate artifacts will teach visitors about the culture of his homeland.
It is in my blood. All those items you see are very precious to me.
Though organizers say the expo is apolitical, the affair is used by governments to promote their nations as tourist destinations to attract investment and project soft power.
To another crisis, hundreds of migrants and refugees have waited outside a United Nations center in Tripoli in recent days to seek help in escaping Libya after what aid groups called a violent crackdown. Over the past 2 weeks, authorities in Tripoli have arrested thousands of migrants and held them in detention centers in a crackdown that has resulted in several deaths.
Hundreds of migrants in Libya's Ain Zara detention center live in basic conditions, sleeping on mattresses in the open air after a crackdown that rights groups have condemned. Crouched in rows on the ground, migrants waited to register with the United Nations Refugee Agency UNHCR.
The situation became terrifying for us, even now, even though we are in a safe place and everything. We are honestly still very afraid after what happened to us in Godshau.
There's nothing. No one has blankets. No one has sheets. No one has clothes. I only have what I'm wearing. We don't even have clothes. When we escaped, we took nothing. Nothing. We didn't even change the flip-flops we are wearing.
Over the past 2 weeks, authorities in Tripoli have arrested thousands of them and held them in detention centers in a crackdown that has resulted in several deaths. Guards and Libyan officials at Ain Zara say they provide the migrants there with food, shelter and medical care. But migrants say many of them lacked supplies and they remained very fearful.
Over the past 2 days, we have had a number of migrants sent to us. The number is around 1,277 migrants, including women and children. Now, we are providing assistance for medical care and humanitarian aid to beds, blankets, and all necessary medical supplies.
The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, said around 250 children, including dozens of infants, were among the thousands detained in the recent crackdown. They faced immediate risk in Tripoli detention centers. Libya's government of national unity has said it is dealing with a complex issue in the legal migration file as it represents a human tragedy, in addition to the social, political and legal consequences locally and internationally.
Thanks for staying with us on the program. A new report says Africa needs to invest up to $50 billion a year in order to cope with the growing threat of climate change. The African Union and World Meteorological Organization warned that about 120 million people face floods, drought, displacement, and extreme heat by the end of this decade if nothing is done.
African countries want more money and a better system of tracking it as they tackle the fallout of a warming planet. That's the message from Africa's lead climate negotiator ahead of the COP26 conference starting at the end of the month. Tanguy Gahuma says countries are failing to hit a $100 billion annual target promised by wealthier nations more than a decade ago.
We need to have a clear view, clear roadmap, how they will put on the table the 100 billion per year, how we can track the 100 billion per year. And without that, the COP26 will not be a success for Africa. We don't have time to lose on negotiation anymore if they have to put that, if they already put that on the table. We need to find a way to track it. We need to find a way to follow how this commitment is achieved by developing countries.
That position highlights tensions ahead of COP26 in the UK's Glasgow. The world's 20 richest nations are responsible for 80% of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's developing countries that are bearing the brunt.
If we prove that someone is responsible for something, it's responsibility to pay for that, to find a solution for that. And this is the basis of the negotiation.
The continent's precarious position was outlined in a stark report from the World Meteorological Organization on Tuesday. It warned that 118 million extremely poor people will be exposed to drought, floods and extreme heat by 2030 if an adequate response is not put in place.
Glaciers are melting worldwide, and that's also the case when it comes to 3 African glaciers, Mount Kenya, Rwenzori and Kilimanjaro. And you can see that there's been major loss of the sea ice area and also sea ice mass, and if the current trends continue, we won't see any glaciers in Africa in 2040s.
Africa, as this report emphasizes, is warming more and at a faster rate than the global average. This calls for more urgent and appropriate policy responses both in Africa and globally. Beyond being a snapshot of climate trends, extreme weather, and associated risks and impacts in key sensitive sectors, the report highlights lessons for climate action in Africa. It provides an important milestone for resilient pathways.
Such dire predictions are why officials in Africa are pushing for funding to be scaled up to more than $1 trillion, even though wealthier nations are missing their current target.
To respond to climate change, while mobilizing 100 billion per annum is presented as an almost Herculean challenge, African NDCs imply investments of over $3 trillion in adaptation and mitigation by 2030, according to the African Development Bank. While these figures may appear daunting, we should note that in just a little bit less than 2 years, over $20 trillion has been mobilized globally to fight COVID-19. Adapting to the impacts of climate change is costing African economies an average of 5% of their GDP. And if warming continues at the rates projected in this report, these costs will increase exponentially within the next decade.
And the impact of climate change is already being felt. The WMO report said 2020 was Africa's 3rd warmest year on record. Drought on a continent that is heavily reliant on agriculture has been worsening. East and West Africa suffered extensive flooding last year, and a low-cost infestation of historic proportions wreaked havoc. In South Sudan, the UN says more than 700 people have been affected by flooding.
We've seen houses submerged, people wading through water, and infrastructure damaged. The floods are a reality. This is the 21st century, and We have spoken to people who've said they have not seen flooding like this since 1962. Climate change does not have to lead to despair, because there are solutions. Solutions include pumping, they include canalization, and they include good planning. What we would like to do as an international community, what we must do, is support the efforts of the people and the government of South Sudan to combat climate change and to see how to make the lives of people better and more hopeful.
All this is why, as Africa's lead climate negotiator prepares to head to the COP6 negotiating table, he has one more message for global powers. The time to act is now.
Over in India, more than 25 people have been killed after heavy rain triggered floods and landslides in the south of the country. Several houses were washed away and people became trapped. Thousands of people have now been evacuated and relief camps set up across the state of Kerala.
Landslides and floods claimed dozens of lives in India's southern state of Kerala over the weekend. Hard-hit Kottayam, rescuers raced to clear debris from a bridge with an excavator. By Wednesday, at least 11 bodies were discovered in Idukki district and another 14 in Kottayam district, after the areas were hit by landslides and flash floods.
There are 4 landslides happened there yesterday. The hill behind me, which has brought all the water and other items to the downwards.
Thousands of people have been evacuated and at least 100 relief camps have been set up. The Army, Navy and Air Force are assisting with flood relief and rescue. This Indian couple even had to sail across submerged streets in a massive cooking pot to reach their wedding venue. While their venue was also partially flooded, the pair were determined to tie the knot in a small ceremony. Annual rainfall supports 2/3 of India's billion-plus population who live in rural areas and rely on farming. However, flash flooding and landslides have become more frequent and severe in recent years. In August 2018, at least 400 people were killed and more than 300,000 evacuated after torrential rain battered Kerala, resulting in the worst flooding the state had seen in nearly a century.
On a lighter note, we wrap up the program in India, where 2 brothers are turning heads literally with their creative yet realistic hair designs, which depict everything from the Taj Mahal to Michael Jackson on their customers' heads. Take a look.
29-year-old Rajwinder Singh Sidhu and his 31-year-old brother Gawinder have become local celebrities in the town of Mandi Dabwali in northern India with their eye-catching art. They pride themselves on being able to depict anything from Hollywood and Bollywood celebrities to international sports stars, as well as favorites like Mickey Mouse and King Kong on people's scarves.
We have made hair designs of various celebrities and monuments, and people really love it.
The finished result looks almost like a tattoo, but will wash out in a few days.
Today, I got a shaved design of the Taj Mahal. The monument is very beautiful, and with this design, I will stand out.
A complex motif can take up to 4 hours to design, but the simpler ones are finished in an hour and cost between $20 to $30. The brothers started their barber business around 7 years ago when they decided not to join their father's profession and become truck drivers. They decided to do something more creative and put their love for drawing to use. Now people come especially to the brothers to get their hair designs done, usually for special social occasions. With their fame spreading, Rajwinder says they hope to go global someday.
We have some plans for the future, and we're working hard to introduce new things. We have plans of taking our work to an international level. Hair design competitions are held in the US and Mexico, and we'll try and participate there and represent India to make our country proud.
But before taking on the world, they're contemplating moving to a bigger city like the capital, New Delhi, or India's entertainment capital, Mumbai, for more exposure.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time, but remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. Stay safe.